stay a while and listen.
The key questions of longevity research. Some questions are much more specific than others. November 13, 2025. Share. Researchers compiled a list of open questions and determined how often they appear in scientific articles. These questions encompass broad aspects of aging and the utility of potential interventions. In Geroscience, a large team of researchers, including João Pedro de Magalhães, has described 100 currently unsolved problems in the field. Finding the right questions. Understanding the fundamental nature of aging has been a problem since people first endeavored to live longer, to the point that finding the right questions can matter more than finding the right answers. Nearly 50 years ago, B.L. Strahler attempted to tackle this in Time, Cells, and Aging, 1, and there has been skepticism as to whether it can be done at all, 2. As the field has completely changed between now and Strahler's time, these researchers chose to revisit the topic, using modern analysis techniques. The most frequently asked questions in research. These questions came from a few sources. First, they sought comments from the research community, collecting a total of 160 open problems and adding them to their database. Additionally, they held a 3-day workshop with 24 scientists in order to gain a better view of the field, creating groups and brainstorming unsolved problems, gaining another 130. Then, the researchers filtered these problems for similarity and relevance, reducing the number to 204. They quested for how frequently these problems were mentioned in article abstracts, using a natural language processing algorithm and multiple checks to ensure that the articles and problems matched. Of these 204 problems, 100 were selected by Professor de Magalhães for inclusion into the Open Longevity database. The biggest question is why. Unsurprisingly, the biggest overall question is why do we age, with 10,808 scientific articles asking this question. This was followed by a question about somatic mutation accumulation, which had 5,977. Questions about cellular processes and species longevity followed, as were questions involving fundamental aging processes in animals and whether or not those processes translate to humans. Biomarkers were also major aspects of concern. A broad question about interventions involving cellular function was less commonly asked than questions about these fundamental questions of aging. Intervention-related questions, however, were the most commonly found on the list. These questions involved targeting inflammation, utilizing embryogenetic processes to slow aging, and employing partial reprogramming techniques. Many other questions involved the amount of overall damage that originates from particular aspects of aging, such as the secretions of senescent cells. There were also questions that were almost never asked, mostly involving very little researched, very particular aspects of the field. For example, only one paper asked about the homeodynamic space, which refers to organizational stability. Only a few papers asked about prioritizing interventions, and mitochondrial citrate and immune responses to mutated cells were also lightly explored topics. The field has come a long way, but there is still much to do. There are similarities between the questions of today and the questions asked by Strahler in 1977, although he focused more on central nervous system disorders, and some questions regarding interspecies differences have been fairly well resolved. Modern research is still exploring the roles of mitochondria, although the modern focus is more on such cellular dynamics than on the fundamental aspects of biology, such as enzymes and ribosomes, that were of scientific interest at the time and are largely well understood today. However, how these biological components are changed during aging is not always certain. Answering questions in science, especially the sorts of complex questions involved in biology, often leads to more questions. These 100 questions are intended to be fundamental to the field, and while answering them may lead to more questions, the process may lead to interventions that extend healthy human lifespan.